From the recovered papers of Dr. Elias Whitmore, Royal Geographic Society, London, found sealed within the walls of his estate. 1923, the ink still trembles in my hand as I commit these words to paper, knowing full well that what I document here will be dismissed as the ravings of a madman. Yet I must record what I have discovered, for the sake of truth, and perhaps for the salvation of our species. The wars of the 19th century, the Crimean, the American Civil War, the Franco-Prussian conflict, were not what history tells us. They were something far more terrible and far more necessary. It began with an anomaly in the British Museum's acquisition records. While cataloging artifacts from the Crimean Peninsula in the winter of 1887, I discovered items that defied explanation. Metallic fragments that exhibited properties unknown to our science, inscribed with symbols that bore no resemblance to any human language ever documented. The fragments were impossibly light, yet harder than the finest steel, and they hummed with a barely perceptible vibration that seemed to resonate through one's very bones. My inquiries led me to Colonel Reginald Ashworth, a veteran of Sevastopol who had spent his retirement years in scholarly pursuits. What he revealed to me in his dimly lit study, surrounded by maps and documents marked with the Crown's highest classification seals, changed everything I believed about our world. "Whitmore," he said, his weathered hands shaking as he poured brandy, "what do you know of the true purpose of the Light Brigade's charge?" I recited the official history, a miscommunicated order, a tragic blunder that cost hundreds of lives in a futile assault on Russian positions. Ashworth's laugh was bitter. "A cover story, my dear fellow. We weren't charging Russian guns that day. We were charging something that had no business existing on this earth." He produced a leather portfolio sealed with wax, within which lay photographs unlike any I had seen. The images showed structures partially buried in the Crimean soil, vast, geometrically impossible edifices that seemed to bend space around them. But most disturbing were the figures scattered around these ruins. They were humanoid in shape, but wrong in every detail, too tall with limbs that articulated in ways human anatomy could not accommodate, and faces that my mind struggled to process even in the stark black and white of early photography. The locals called them the sleepers, Ashworth continued. They had been dormant for centuries, perhaps millennia, but something had begun to wake them. The earthquakes that preceded the war, the strange lights in the sky, the mass animal deaths, all signs of their stirring. According to the documents Ashworth shared, British forces had encountered the first evidence of these beings in 1853, when a routine survey expedition in the Crimea broke through into what they initially believed to be ancient catacombs. What they found instead was a network of chambers containing technology that defied comprehension and the preserved remains of a civilization that predated human history by eons. The beings, for lack of a better term, had built cities beneath the earth, connected by tunnels that stretched across continents. Their architecture followed no earthly principle, with surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid while maintaining structural integrity, and passages that appeared to exist in more dimensions than human perception could grasp. Most unsettling were the murals that covered every surface, depicting scenes of their dominion over primitive human tribes, showing our ancestors not as the masters of their destiny, but as livestock, carefully cultivated and controlled. The discovery had prompted urgent communication between the major powers of Europe. Secret conferences were held in Vienna, attended not by diplomats, but by military engineers, archaeologists, and men of science sworn to absolute secrecy. The conclusion reached was unanimous and terrifying. These beings were beginning to wake, and their return to active life would mean the extinction of human civilization. The wars that followed were not conflicts between nations, but coordinated campaigns to destroy the emerging threat. The charge of the Light Brigade was a desperate assault on a sleeper awakening site. The bloody trenches of the American Civil War concealed excavation efforts to locate and destroy underground complexes discovered beneath Virginia and Tennessee. The siege of Paris during the Franco-Prussian War was cover for the systematic demolition of structures found beneath the city's foundations. As I delved deeper into Ashworth's archives, the scope of the conspiracy became clear. Weapons manufacturers across Europe had been secretly developing new artillery specifically designed to penetrate the otherworldly materials used in sleeper construction. The devastating effectiveness of rifled cannons and explosive shells in these conflicts was not merely an advancement in military technology, but the result of years of research into methods of destroying structures that conventional weapons could not touch. The casualties of these wars, hundreds of thousands dead across multiple continents, were not the unfortunate byproduct of human ambition and territorial disputes. They were the price paid to prevent something infinitely worse. Letters between field commanders, written in codes that took months to decipher, spoke of battles fought in chambers deep underground, where men faced horrors that drove many to madness. They described weapons that fired beams of coherent light, defensive systems that could turn solid matter to gas, and, worst of all, the sleepers themselves in their final moments of awakening. One particular account, written by a Union Army engineer named Marcus Holloway, described the final assault on a complex discovered beneath Bull Run. His words, scrawled in a hand that grew increasingly erratic as the report progressed, painted a picture of desperate men wielding newly invented explosive charges in tunnels that seemed to shift and change around them. He wrote of his squad's encounter with a partially awakened sleeper, a being that stood 9 feet tall with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that held an intelligence that was utterly alien yet terrifyingly calculating. The creature had spoken to them, Holloway claimed, not with words but directly into their minds, showing them visions of Earth's future under their rule. Cities would be rebuilt according to their geometric principles, with humans serving purposes that Holloway's Victorian sensibilities could barely comprehend. The human population would be managed, culled, and modified to serve as components in vast biological machines whose purpose extended far beyond terrestrial concerns. But the sleepers had underestimated human resourcefulness and determination. The explosive charges, developed through captured samples of their technology, proved capable of disrupting the fundamental forces that held their structures together. As their underground cities collapsed, the remaining sleepers fell into a deeper dormancy, one from which they might never again emerge. The cover-up that followed was perhaps humanity's greatest collective effort. Historians were carefully guided in their documentation of events. Eyewitness accounts were suppressed or discredited. The true artifacts and remains were collected by secret societies that transcended national boundaries, stored in facilities hidden beneath major cities, guarded by orders of men and women sworn to prevent their secrets from ever reaching the public. Yet evidence remained for those who knew how to look. The unexplained technological leaps of the late 19th century, the rapid development of electricity, the sudden understanding of electromagnetic principles, the breakthroughs in metallurgy and chemistry were not the products of human genius alone. They were reverse-engineered from sleeper technology, carefully studied and adapted to human understanding. The great inventors of the age were not working in isolation, but as part of a carefully orchestrated effort to ensure that humanity would be better prepared should the threat ever return. Tesla's electrical experiments, Edison's innovations, the sudden proliferation of industrial techniques that transformed the world, all were built upon foundations of knowledge taken from the ruins of a non-human civilization. The rapid pace of human advancement in the decades following the Great Wars was not coincidental, but necessary, a desperate race to achieve technological parity with beings whose civilization had spanned the cosmos while humans still lived in caves. The railway networks that connected continents, the telegraph systems that enabled instant communication across vast distances, the industrial capacity that could produce weapons and machinery on an unprecedented scale, all were designed with a hidden purpose. Should the sleepers ever wake again, humanity would not face them as divided tribes with primitive weapons, but as a unified species armed with the tools necessary for survival. In my investigations, I discovered references to ongoing monitoring efforts. Seismic stations established ostensibly for geological research were actually listening for specific vibration patterns that might indicate sleeper activity. Archaeological expeditions to remote regions carried equipment designed not for historical discovery, but for the detection and elimination of potential awakening sites. The great powers' sudden interest in colonizing the most remote corners of the Earth was driven not by economic opportunity alone, but by the need to maintain global surveillance for signs of the ancient threat. The documents spoke of contingency plans, constantly updated and refined by secret councils that met in the shadows of international conferences. Should the sleepers begin to wake again, humanity was prepared to respond with swift and devastating force. Chemical weapons, whose development was officially banned by international treaty, existed in hidden stockpiles specifically designed to combat non-human physiology. Explosive devices of unprecedented destructive power were held in reserve, their existence known only to a select few who understood the true nature of the threat they were designed to counter. But perhaps most disturbing of all was the discovery that the sleepers' influence had not been entirely eliminated. Their technology, while damaged and dormant, continued to emit subtle signals that affected human behavior and development. The rapid changes in human society following the wars, the shift toward industrialization, the move away from rural communities, the increasing centralization of population in cities, were not entirely natural developments, but responses to influences that humanity could not consciously perceive. The great social movements of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the push toward global communication and travel, the development of international law and cooperation, all were unconscious responses to the imperative of species survival. Humanity was being shaped, subtly but inexorably, into a form better suited to detect and respond to threats that operated on a scale beyond individual nations or cultures. As I write these words, I am aware that time may be growing short. Recent seismic readings from monitoring stations across the globe have detected patterns that match those recorded in the months before the Great Awakening of the 1850s. The technological marvels of our age, radio communication, powered flight, the harnessing of electrical energy, may soon be put to their ultimate test. The next war, when it comes, may not be between human nations, but between humanity itself and forces that have slumbered beneath our feet since before recorded history began. The men who fought and died in the wars of the 19th century were not victims of human folly, but heroes of a struggle whose true nature could never be acknowledged. They gave their lives not for territory or ideology, but for the continued existence of their species. The monuments we have erected to their memory honor their sacrifice, even if they cannot speak the truth of what they died to prevent. I have sealed copies of these documents in locations that future generations may discover, should the official histories prove inadequate preparation for what is to come. The truth has been hidden to prevent panic, but it may be that the time for secrecy is ending. If the patterns I have observed continue, if the subtle signs that preceded the last awakening are beginning to manifest again, then humanity must be ready to face the truth about our world and our place in it. We are not the first intelligent species to inhabit this planet, and without vigilance, we may not be the last. The civilization we have built, the technologies we have developed, the global networks that connect us, all exist because previous generations fought and died to ensure we would have the tools necessary for survival. The wars we remember as human tragedies were actually humanity's greatest victories, one at costs we're only now beginning to understand. The earth beneath our feet holds secrets that would shatter our understanding of history, evolution, and our place in the cosmos. We live on the ruins of a civilization so ancient and alien that our minds struggle to comprehend its true nature. But we also live as the beneficiaries of those who recognized the threat and took action to neutralize it, even at the cost of their own lives and reputations. As I prepare to seal this testimony, I am acutely aware that I may be the last to document these truths in such detail. The secret societies that have guarded this knowledge for generations are aging, their records scattered, their vigilance perhaps growing lax in an age that believes itself civilized and safe. But safety is an illusion when built upon foundations we do not understand, and civilization is a fragile construction when erected above the ruins of something far older and more powerful than ourselves. The true history of the 19th century remains hidden in classified archives, encoded in the private correspondence of dead men, and buried beneath the official monuments to wars whose real purpose has been forgotten. But the evidence remains for those with eyes to see and the courage to accept what they find. We are not alone on this world, and we never have been. We are the inheritors of a victory won by previous generations, and the guardians of secrets that may determine whether humanity has a future at all. The wars are over, but the vigil continues. In the depths of the earth, ancient things lie sleeping, their dreams perhaps stirring with visions of a world remade according to their design. Against that possibility, against that ancient and patient threat, humanity must remain watchful, armed, and, above all, united in purpose. For if they wake again, if the sleepers rise from their tombs of stone and metal and nightmare, the next war will determine not which nation shall rule, but which species shall inherit the earth. The documents I have gathered tell a story that official history cannot acknowledge, but one that every thinking person must be prepared to understand. We are the children of giants, living in the shadows of achievements so vast that we have mistaken them for natural features of our world. The mountains that define our landscapes, the valleys that channel our rivers, the very continents themselves may bear the scars of conflicts fought eons before human civilization began. And somewhere, in chambers deep beyond the reach of sunlight, the architects of that ancient world may yet be waiting for their time to return. This is the terrible truth about the wars of the 19th century, and the more terrible truth about the world we inhabit. We are not the masters of our destiny, but the beneficiaries of a victory we barely understand, living on borrowed time in a world that was never meant to be ours. The price of our continued existence is eternal vigilance against threats that sleep but do not die, that wait with the patience of geological time for the moment when humanity's guard might finally fall. May God grant that such a moment never comes, and may future generations prove worthy of the sacrifice made by those who fought and died to ensure our species would survive to see the dawn of a new century. The dead keep their secrets well, but the living must remain ready to defend what they died to protect. For in the end, we are all soldiers in a war that began before history, and may continue long after our civilization has crumbled to dust. The truth sleeps as deeply as our ancient enemies, but unlike them, it must one day wake. 09:47, The Forgotten Testament. Archives of the Great Concealment, continued from the recovered papers of Dr. Elias Whitmore. The truth sleeps as deeply as our ancient enemies, but unlike them, it must one day wake. In the months following my initial discoveries, I found myself drawn deeper into a web of connections that spanned continents and decades. The network of those who knew the truth extended far beyond the military men and government officials I had initially encountered. Artists, writers, scientists, and industrialists all have been touched by knowledge of the sleeper civilization, though many carried only fragments of the larger picture. It was through a chance encounter at the Royal Society that I met Professor Heinrich Zimmermann, a German archaeologist whose official work focused on Roman ruins, but whose private research delved into far older mysteries. Over dinner at his London club, speaking in hushed tones despite the room's apparent emptiness, he revealed discoveries that had been suppressed by his own government decades earlier. The Franco-Prussian War, he confided, was precipitated by excavations beneath Metz. The French had discovered something extraordinary, a complex that predated their occupation by thousands of years. But they made the mistake of attempting to study it rather than destroy it. According to Zimmerman's carefully preserved notes, French archaeologists working in the region had uncovered evidence of sophisticated machinery still functioning after millennia of burial. The devices appeared to be some form of communication equipment, broadcasting signals into the depths of the earth. When French scientists attempted to interpret these transmissions, they inadvertently sent a response signal that began awakening sleeper installations across Europe. The Prussian invasion of France, rather than being driven purely by political ambition, was a desperate attempt to reach and neutralize the Metz complex before its signals could fully activate the dormant network. The siege of the city, which lasted for months and cost thousands of lives, was actually a carefully orchestrated cover for engineering teams who worked in underground chambers while shells fell overhead. Zimmerman showed me photographs taken during these operations, images that even now, years later, disturb my sleep. The machinery discovered beneath Metz defied every principle of physics and engineering known to 19th century science. Crystalline structures the size of cathedral spires pulsed with internal light, connected by conduits that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Most disturbing were the preservation chambers, transparent cylinders containing what appeared to be sleeper specimens in various stages of development. They were not merely sleeping, Zimmerman explained, his voice barely above a whisper. They were evolving, adapting their forms for some purpose we could not comprehend. The French scientists theorized that the specimens were being prepared for emergence into a changed world, one that the sleeper civilization had been monitoring and influencing for centuries. This revelation led me to examine the great social and technological changes of the preceding decades with new eyes. The Industrial Revolution, which historians attributed to human ingenuity and economic forces, began to appear as something far more orchestrated. The specific timing of breakthrough discoveries, the particular directions of technological development, the emergence of global communication networks, all suggested an underlying pattern that human minds alone could not have conceived. Through contacts established by Zimmerman, I gained access to the private archives of several European industrial families. The Rothschilds, the Krupps, the Armstrongs, all had been approached in the decades following the wars by representatives of the secret societies that guarded humanity's greatest secret. Their vast financial resources and industrial capabilities had been quietly directed toward projects that served a purpose beyond mere profit. The development of the Suez Canal, which officially opened trade routes between Europe and Asia, was actually constructed to provide rapid military access to suspected sleeper sites in the region. The transcontinental railway systems that connected the American coasts were designed with station locations determined not by population centers, but by proximity to underground monitoring equipment. The telegraph networks that revolutionized global communication included hidden frequencies reserved for the transmission of warnings about potential sleeper activity. Perhaps most remarkably, I discovered that the great museums of the world, the British Museum, the Louvre, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, served as more than repositories of human culture. Their basements contained carefully concealed vaults where artifacts of sleeper origin were studied and stored. Teams of researchers, working under cover of legitimate archaeological expeditions, continued to search for and neutralize evidence of the ancient civilization. One particular document, written in the hand of museum curator Dr. Margaret Blackwood, detailed the discovery and subsequent destruction of a sleeper installation found during the construction of the London Underground. The excavation teams, working to extend the Metropolitan Railway, had broken through into chambers that contained what appeared to be a transportation system of impossible sophistication. The tunnels extended in directions that violated fundamental principles of geometry, Blackwood wrote. Passages that should have intersected instead ran parallel through the same space. Our surveyors reported distances that changed depending on the direction of travel, and several workers claimed to have encountered the same chamber from multiple entrances that could not possibly have connected. The installation was ultimately destroyed using explosives developed specifically for such purposes, but not before researchers had documented technology that suggested the sleeper civilization had mastered forms of transportation that operated outside normal space-time constraints. The implications were staggering. If the sleepers had possessed the ability to move instantly between distant locations, their influence could have extended across the globe regardless of physical barriers. This discovery led to a comprehensive mapping project that revealed the true scope of sleeper civilization. Using information gathered from dozens of sites across multiple continents, secret cartographers had pieced together the outlines of a transportation network that connected installations from the Arctic to the Antarctic, from the depths of the ocean floors to the heights of mountain ranges that had not yet been fully explored by surface dwellers. The maps, which I was permitted to view only under the strictest security conditions, showed a world very different from the one known to conventional geography. Beneath the familiar outlines of continents and ocean basins lay a second world, a network of chambers, passages, and installations that dwarfed any construction project attempted by human civilization. The scope of sleeper engineering made the pyramids of Egypt appear as modest garden ornaments by comparison. More disturbing still was the evidence that this network remained partially functional. Monitoring stations established at key locations continued to detect electromagnetic signatures consistent with dormant, but operational technology. The signals suggested that while the sleepers themselves remained in their death-like slumber, their automated systems continued to function, maintaining the installations and perhaps preparing for eventual reactivation. The implications for human security were sobering. Despite the victories of the 19th century wars, humanity remained vulnerable to a civilization that had been ancient when the first humans developed agriculture. The secret societies tasked with monitoring the threat had evolved into a shadow government that operated across national boundaries, funded by resources that dwarfed the budgets of entire nations. Through my research, I learned of the Concordat of Vienna, a treaty signed not by national representatives, but by the leaders of the various secret organizations responsible for humanity's defense. This agreement, renewed every decade in ceremonies hidden from public view, established protocol for sharing intelligence about sleeper activity and coordinating responses to potential threats. The Concordat's archives, housed in a facility buried beneath the Austrian capital, contained reports that painted a picture of ongoing vigilance maintained at enormous cost. Teams of specialists, recruited from the ranks of military engineers, archaeologists, and natural philosophers, worked in shifts to monitor thousands of sites where sleeper activity might potentially resume. The psychological toll of this work was immense. Many operatives suffered from conditions that physicians could not properly diagnose, ailments of the mind that seemed to result from prolonged exposure to influences that human consciousness was not equipped to process. One report, filed by an operative known only as Agent Meridian, described a routine inspection of a supposedly neutralized installation beneath the Swiss Alps. What the team discovered challenged their understanding of the thoroughness of previous neutralization efforts. The complex showed signs of autonomous repair, Meridian wrote. Sections that had been destroyed during the 1871 operation had been reconstructed using materials that we could not identify. The reconstruction work appeared to have been performed by mechanical systems that had remained functional despite the destruction of their controlling intelligence. Most disturbing, the repairs incorporated design improvements that suggested the automated systems were capable of learning and adaptation. This discovery led to a fundamental reassessment of the threat. The sleepers, even in their dormant state, remained capable of maintaining and improving their infrastructure through automated systems that operated according to principles beyond human understanding. The wars of the 19th century had succeeded in preventing immediate reawakening, but they had not eliminated the underlying civilization that made such reawakening possible. The response to this realization was swift and comprehensive. New protocols were established for more frequent and thorough inspections of known sites. Research into advanced explosive techniques accelerated, with particular focus on developing weapons that could destroy not just sleeper structures, but the fundamental forces that allowed those structures to exist. Most significantly, plans were developed for what was euphemistically termed the final solution, a coordinated global assault that would simultaneously target every known sleeper installation, using weapons of such destructive power that they would render vast areas of the Earth uninhabitable. The development of these ultimate weapons proceeded in secret laboratories hidden beneath major cities. Scientists working under conditions of absolute secrecy pushed the boundaries of chemistry and physics to create explosive devices that could channel forces equivalent to volcanic eruptions. The work was dangerous. Several facilities were lost to catastrophic accidents that were officially attributed to industrial mishaps or natural disasters. Yet even as humanity prepared for the possibility of total war against an ancient enemy, evidence emerged that the conflict was far from one-sided. Intelligence gathered from monitoring stations suggested that sleeper automated systems had detected humanity's preparations and were implementing countermeasures of their own. Reports from field agents described anomalous phenomena at multiple sites: electromagnetic disturbances that disrupted communication equipment, gravitational anomalies that affected precision instruments, and, most disturbing of all, evidence of what appeared to be biological agents designed to influence human behavior and development. Dr. Edmund Blackthorne, a physician recruited by the secret societies to study these biological effects, documented cases of individuals who had been exposed to sleeper installations and subsequently exhibited extraordinary capabilities: enhanced mathematical reasoning, intuitive understanding of engineering principles, and, most remarkably, apparent immunity to the psychological effects that debilitated most humans who encountered sleeper technology. The subject appeared to have been modified at a fundamental level, Blackthorne reported. Their neural structures show patterns of organization that differ significantly from baseline human anatomy. More concerning, these modifications appear to be heritable. Children born to affected individuals display similar enhancements from birth. This discovery raised profound questions about the nature of human evolution and development. Had the sleeper civilization been subtly influencing human biological development over millennia? Were the individuals showing enhanced capabilities the result of recent exposure, or were they the latest generation in a breeding program that spanned thousands of years? The implications were staggering. If humanity itself had been shaped by sleeper influence, then the very minds responsible for defending against the ancient threat might be operating according to imperatives planted by the enemy they sought to defeat. The secret societies found themselves facing the possibility that their entire understanding of the conflict might be based on assumptions that had been deliberately cultivated by the civilization they opposed. In response to these revelations, the most extreme elements within the secret societies began advocating for what they termed purification protocols, systematic identification, and elimination of individuals showing signs of sleeper influence. This faction argued that humanity's only hope for independence lay in removing all traces of the ancient civilization's genetic and cultural interference, even if such removal required the sacrifice of enhanced individuals who might otherwise serve as valuable assets. The debate over this proposal split the secret societies into opposing camps. Moderates argued that the enhanced individuals might represent humanity's best hope for understanding and ultimately defeating sleeper technology. Extremists countered that any individual touched by sleeper influence, regardless of their apparent loyalty, represented a potential vector for the ancient civilization's return to active control. The conflict between these factions nearly led to open warfare within the shadow organization that protected humanity. Secret meetings devolved into armed confrontations. Safe houses were raided by competing operatives. Several key figures disappeared entirely, leaving behind only encrypted messages warning of infiltration and betrayal. It was during this period of internal strife that the most disturbing discovery of all came to light. Deep within the archives of the Concordat, researchers uncovered documents that suggested the sleeper civilization had not been merely dormant during the centuries of human development. Instead, they had been active participants in human affairs, operating through intermediaries who might not have been aware of their true nature. Historical figures previously understood as exceptional human individuals were revealed to have had access to knowledge and capabilities that could only have come from sleeper sources. Inventors whose breakthroughs seemed to emerge from nowhere, military leaders whose strategies defied conventional understanding, religious figures whose insights transcended normal human wisdom, all began to appear as potential agents of the ancient civilization. The implications of this revelation were paralyzing. If the sleepers had been guiding human development for centuries, then every aspect of human civilization might be suspect. Technologies that humanity considered its greatest achievements might be tools designed to serve purposes that humans could not comprehend. Social structures that provided stability and progress might be control mechanisms that ensured humanity's development followed paths predetermined by an alien intelligence. As I write these final passages, I am acutely aware that my own discoveries may be part of a pattern larger than I can perceive. The documents I have uncovered, the connections I have made, the very insights that have driven my research, all might be the result of influences planted long ago by minds that operate on scales of time and purpose beyond human understanding. The wars of the 19th century were real, and they were fought by humans who believed they were defending their species against an existential threat. But the victory they achieved may have been illusory, a tactical success that served strategic purposes conceived by the very civilization they sought to defeat. The price of that victory, paid in blood and sacrifice across multiple continents, may have purchased nothing more than the illusion of independence for a species that has never truly been free. Yet even in the face of such possibilities, I find reason for hope. Human courage, ingenuity, and determination have proven capable of achievements that even our ancient predecessors might not have anticipated. The technologies we have developed, the social structures we have created, the global networks that connect our species, all represent authentic human accomplishments, regardless of whatever influences might have shaped their development. If the final confrontation between humanity and the sleeper civilization is yet to come, we will face it not as primitives armed with crude weapons, but as inheritors of knowledge hard-won through centuries of struggle and sacrifice. The men who died in the wars of the 19th century may not have achieved the complete victory they sought, but they ensured that their descendants will be better prepared for whatever challenges awaited. The vigilance continues, as it must, as it always has. In laboratories hidden from public view, scientists work to understand technologies that defy explanation. In monitoring stations scattered across the globe, dedicated individuals watch for signs that the ancient threat might be stirring once again. In archives locked away from curious eyes, the complete history of humanity's greatest struggle waits to be revealed when the time is right. We live on the ruins of a non-human civilization, but we are not merely squatters in an abandoned house. We are the heirs to a victory bought with blood and determination, the custodians of secrets that may determine our species' ultimate fate. The terrible truth about the 19th century wars is not that they were fought, but that they may have been only the opening movements in a conflict that spans millennia and encompasses purposes we are only beginning to understand. The earth beneath our feet holds mysteries that would transform our understanding of existence itself. The stars above may shine upon civilizations that still remember when this world belonged to others. Between earth and stars, humanity continues its eternal vigil, armed with knowledge and determination, ready to defend what previous generations died to protect. The story continues, as it must, as it always has. In the end, we are all soldiers in a war that began before memory and may continue beyond imagination. Our weapons are knowledge and courage. Our battlefield is reality itself. Our victory, should we achieve it, will be measured not in territory conquered, but in the continued existence of everything we hold dear. The dead keep their secrets, but the living must honor their sacrifice by remaining ready for whatever may come. For in the end, we are the inheritors of their struggle, the beneficiaries of their courage, and perhaps, if we prove worthy, the authors of their ultimate vindication.